The present paper is the grounded theory analysis of the prologue of the book A Beautiful Mind by Sylvia Nasser. The grounded theory analysis has been done keeping in mind the whole story, and a final code in the form of a generalized theory has been chosen. The analysis builds on the sensitivity of the whole issue as well as the beauty of the relationships it encompasses. The analysis has led to the development of a model that explains both the occurrence of schizophrenia in a genius as well as the mysterious remission it followed. Creativity is the ability to produce something novel and appropriate in the given situation or circumstance. There is a marked difference between creativity and exceptional creativity, which leads to the emergence of something dramatically new, such as an idea of integrated circuits which made the concept of modern computers. Abnormality can be defined as a deviance from normality in psychological terms. There, however, has always been a very thin line between creativity and abnormality. Every creative genius, be it John Nash Jr., Albert Einstein, or Newton, have been perceived as being odd in their own ways. Odd, in layman language, is anything that does not conform to the norms prescribed by the given society. Thus, it can be said that genius in one way is also a deviation from normality, though it is not considered to be abnormal. When we consider something to be abnormal, we normally add certain value judgments to distinguish what leads to it being called abnormal and not normal. In order to understand this relationship between creativity, abnormality, and genius, I undertook the grounded theory analysis of the book A Beautiful Mind. Though this paper only dabbles with the prologue of this book, but it constructs a model that may help establish the relationship between abnormality and normality, as well as genius. This book tells the story of John Nash Jr. in carefully documented detail, based on hundreds of interviews with friends, family, and acquaintances, as well as a review of the available documents. This story follows a mathematical genius who is accompanied by a wild, chaotic personal life. This chaos that finally welled up, spilled over, and led to the dissolution of his carefully constructed life. It follows the story of John Nash, a story that has never been written, since anyone who knew of him did not want to put schizophrenia on the record, as Nash had already suffered so much. It focuses on his fight to retain his mental capacity and have his mental illness go into a remission based on his belief that everything in this world has a rational and logical solution. Schizophrenia is a disorder that affects 1 in 100 people. It is one of the most severe and handicapping mental disorders. The hallmark of schizophrenia is the loss of touch with reality. Schizophrenia is a psychotic mental disorder characterized by symptoms of thought, behavior, and social problems. It commonly manifests itself as auditory hallucinations, paranoid or bizarre delusions, as well as disorganized speech, thought, or behavior, all of which symptoms that could be seen in John Nash Jr. Thus, A Beautiful Mind was one of the primary books that I could pick up in order to understand the relationship between creativity and abnormality. This paper uses double hermeneutics, since the biography is based on the observations of Sylvia Nasser and its analysis based on my observations. The interpretations in this paper are guided by the fact that I have read the whole book, as well as my understanding of psychology and schizophrenia, being a student of this very subject. Now, I would like to focus on the methodology that was used in order to bring about this analysis. The 3 steps that need to be followed in order to lead to the outcome of a theory are open coding. Open coding is a part of analysis concerned with the identification, naming, categorizing, and description of phenomena found within the text. Open coding essentially could be done for each line, sentence, or even every paragraph. Open coding is set to answer questions like, what is this about? What is being referred to in this particular sentence? Axial coding. Axial coding is the process of relating the codes, categories, and properties to each other via a combination of inductive as well as deductive thinking. To simplify this process, rather than look for any or all kind of relationships, grounded theorists emphasize on causal relationships and fit things into a basic frame of generic relationships. Selective coding. Selective coding is the process of choosing one core category and relating all the other categories to this one category. The essential idea is to develop a single storyline around which all the events and incidents seem to revolve. This is a summary of what grounded theory approach in general is. It was this method that helped in constructing a model that explains the occurrence as well as the remission of schizophrenia. Results and discussion. Reading and rereading the data that I had collected led to certain results which have been further discussed and analyzed in this section. On the basis of all the reading and the notes that I had formed, a total of 63 open codes came about. These paved the way for 11 axial codes. The axial codes found in this paper are as follows. Onset of schizophrenia in a genius. It is often difficult to discern the line between creativity and madness. At times, we also find ourselves in the uncomfortable position of being unable to describe the fine line between truth and fiction, reality and distortion, a dilemma that can be particularly problematic when dealing with highly creative individuals. Symptoms and human nature. The symptoms of schizophrenia seem to amplify Nash's pre-existing nature to a large extent. The isolation, solidarity, oddity, as well as the urge for originality seem to become more and more peculiar. Thus, the new him with the disorder did not seem much far away from the old him. Absorption and identification. Absorption is an apt metaphor for Nash. The very factors that led to his creativity were the ones that finally entrapped him in the midst of his mental illness. What he lacked was the ability to identify or distinguish between his theoretical assumptions and his delusions. Narcissism and introversion. Nash's narcissism, only to create something that could be recognized or spoken about, was one of the major reasons that led him to succumb to his mental illness. Nash's narcissism may be seen as the other side of the extraordinary talents and his intense solidarity. Elements of what Kernberg has described as a narcissistic personality structure, including intense ambitiousness, grandiose fantasies, feelings of inferiority, and an over-reliance on external acclaim and admiration, all of which were present in Nash. Nash preferred working alone. He had a solitary and independent air about himself. This was emulated in his theory, where he chose to focus on the individual rather than the whole group in general. defense against anxiety. Artistic expression and introversion can be described as Nash's defense against anxiety due to his extreme fear of love and hatred, which can be seen from his very behaviors and his anxiousness in social situations. The breakdown of this artistic wall could be one of the major reasons for him to develop schizophrenia. Need for recognition. There seems to be a difficult balance between Nash's need for accomplishment and his need for recognition. The absence of external recognition creates a dilemma for an artist whose genius may go unrecognized and be seen as madness. This very need made it difficult for Nash to carry on his work without receiving any further acclaim. Thus, even in the days after his initial treatment for schizophrenia, he continued to try and evolve and develop something new and novel. Realization. The realization of Nash that he, with his mental illness, was quite different from what he once was, seems to be one of the most important catalysts in helping Nash enter remission. What had initially begun as a defense that helped him stay within the confines of his head eventually also helped him plant himself into reality, both internally and externally. Nash's realization led him to revive his need to be absorbed in activities and work, and this seems to be the element that fueled his final recovery. Rationality. The realization of the disparity between himself now and that before the mental illness made Nash realize how far he had moved from the rationality, a principle that formerly seemed to govern his very existence. The lack of logic and reason behind his delusions made him grapple in the dark in order to be able to reach the light, guiding him into hope and reality. Creativity. Nash's creativity and novelty seemed to be factors that led him to discover his brilliant theories, and it was this very element of his personality that at first propelled him into the darkness of schizophrenia, but then also helped him get out of it. Recovering lucidity. After 30 odd years of suffering, Nash mysteriously returned to being his old rational logical self. Though for Nash, the path of recovery was the most treacherous, as his rational head told him that the delusions were not real, and he existed on the mere ignorance of these delusions and hallucinations. Recovery for him did not simply mean the return to reality, but also living a life immersed in work. Recognition. Nash's contributions were finally recognized after the remission of his schizophrenia. His need to be recognized was fulfilled after his return to a world of reality and reason. Based on these axial codes, as well as further observation of the data, I deduced a theory that helps explain the relationship between creativity and madness or abnormality. Genius and madness, a didactic relationship. As can be seen from the biography of John Nash Jr., there were 3 factors that led to the emergence of schizophrenia in this genius. I would like to start off with the first and the most obvious, human nature. As has been said earlier, the symptoms of schizophrenia in John Nash Jr. seemed to be an amplification of his pre-existing human nature. Logical and rational. Nash believed that everything in this world had a logical and rational reasoning, as well as a logical and rational solution. Narcissism. It has been said that a lot of aspects of Nash's personality were similar to those described by Kernberg as a part of the narcissistic personality. first and foremost were the grandiose delusions. His very belief that he was working for the US Secret Services makes me say that he wanted to be affiliated to something bigger and larger. And what bigger than saving your own country? These were all delusions of grandeur, delusions of giving oneself more importance. Creativity and mathematics, as well as lack of social connect, are two factors which can also be called symptoms of the schizoid personality type. It is said that individuals with a schizoid personality disorder show exceptional creativity in abstract concepts, mathematics topping the list of abstractions. Lack of social connect could be seen in Nash's social awkwardness as well as his anxiety of being loved and hated. Both of these can be parts of what is known as a schizoid personality type. A schizoid personality type early on was said to be a precursor to schizophrenia. However, experiments done in this field did not seem to show any relationship between the two. But it is very possible that in this case, the schizoid personality was actually a precursor to the underlying schizophrenia. The next aspect I would like to touch upon is childhood. Nash's biography states that from early on in life, he showed odd behavior. Social reclusiveness, introversion were all aspects that his neighbors and his parents were concerned about and thought were odd in a child of his age. Secondly, Nash belonged to a cohort that experienced the Second World War. The Second World War led to paranoia in Nash, paranoia that his country may be under siege again, paranoia that what if the war broke out once again. He was constantly paranoid of the Soviets, the Russians. This was another factor that may have led to the emergence of schizophrenia in this genius. Family. It has also been said that Nash had an unstable grandfather. Though the biography does not touch upon how unstable the grandfather was and exactly what aspects of the grandfather were called as unstable, but they do mention that his grandfather was unstable. Now I would like to sum up some of the factors that may have led to the advent of schizophrenia in this genius. An unstable grandfather points towards a genetic lineage that may show that the individual had a family history of some sort of mental illness. Schizoid personality disorder. Schizoid personality disorder, at one point of time as mentioned earlier, was said to be a precursor for schizophrenia. Grandiose delusions. Grandiose delusions were delusions that were simply amplified in his schizophrenia. Odd behavior. Odd behavior showed by the individual himself throughout his childhood. A number of studies show that children with schizophrenia or genes of schizophrenia have behaviors different from those of normal children. Paranoia. Paranoia that was caused due to the World War. The excessive paranoia of being attacked again. These were all factors that, according to my analysis of this book, may have led to the advent of schizophrenia in this genius. Lastly, I would touch upon factors that may have led to this remission, a remission that is called mysterious and magical. First of all, support from family members. Throughout his illness, Nash had excessive support from his wife. His wife had full faith in him from the day he said that he knows there is a logical solution and a logical reason for this disorder. Secondly, limited treatment. However limited, Nash was treated for a period of over 6 months. The treatment consisted of electrical shocks as well as oral medication, which he stopped because he thought he was not being able to fulfill his daily duties or work properly. Logic and rationality. Nash's belief that everything had a logical and rational solution to it was another factor that may have led to the remission of this severe mental disorder in this mathematical genius. He did say that I know what I'm seeing is not real, and I will myself come up with a solution to it. His remission cannot be described as a complete remission or a complete absence of the disorder in this individual, but it was simply an ignorance of the delusions as well as the auditory hallucinations that he was experiencing. He learned to live with them while ignoring them. It was his conquer over his own mental condition. Creativity. It is a big possibility that his own creativity, his need for originality, led to his remission as well. He did not want to stick to the conventional treatments that may have been prescribed for schizophrenia, but wanted to come up with a treatment that was novel, something that made him stand out and stand apart. All in all these four factors led to the remission of this severe handicapping mental disorder in Nash. And this is the end of my paper. I started off this paper to simply understand the relationship between creativity and abnormality, but I have ended this paper understanding the process of how this disease developed in this mathematical genius and how it went into a remission due to his own mental willpower. Thank you.